22. I have a funny Tuesday morning beginning to the new year. I make coffee every morning, and I prefer my coffee with creamer, and so does Brenda. But we didn't have any creamer this morning. So Brenda took hers black, and in my mind, I went through this process. We got these little cheesecakes for New Year's, and I'm thinking, coffee creamer. Cheesecake is made out of cream, right? So I took one of those little raspberry cheesecakes and put it in my cup and used it as creamer for my coffee. And I'm here to tell you, that's a very bad idea. Just drink it black. All right, so today we're going to continue in Hebrews chapter 11, and the idea is a great idea to start our new year. The writer is going to talk about believing in something that you can't see because you've been promised an inheritance. What a great concept. And it all hinges on, do you trust the one who made the promise? That's really what faith is all about. Do you trust the one who made the promise? And do you trust it enough to orient your life and behave in such a way that it reflects that you trust the one who made the promise? And so we're going to talk today about Abraham, and for the next few weeks about Abraham and his family, because one man's faith affects the rest of the family in a significant way, to the point where it pushes them to either trust or not trust. And clearly that's what faith does in my family, and in pretty much everybody's family. And for Abraham, some of his family trusts and some does not. And sometimes they trust completely, and sometimes they reflect their doubts, which is a fascinating reality. But in the end, they come back to faith. So here's how the writer puts it. This is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. By faith, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, he obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Now, I'll confess that most of my life, I feel like I don't know where I'm going. But I do know something, but not everybody knows it. I know that I have an inheritance. I cannot see it, but I know that I have it. And I know that I have it by faith. I believe in something I cannot see, and I believe it because I trust the one who made the promise. And that's really the fundamental definition of faith. Anyone who doesn't have faith doesn't have the inheritance. They don't believe in the inheritance because they don't believe or trust the one who made the promise. They don't even believe the promise is real. And so, of course, there's no inheritance for them. They can't even see it. They don't live their life according to what it is. But for me and for you and for people of faith, we live our life according to the promise of the inheritance. And so I know that I am an adopted and an heir of the inheritance that God has set aside for me as a man of faith. And that inheritance is twofold, which is just powerful. The first and the obvious one is I have an inheritance in the heavens, and I will be resurrected unto glory. That is an inheritance that is saved for men and women of faith. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, and if you're not pleasing God, you're not going to receive any inheritance because you're not adopted as his child. And so it just makes sense. Even in the legal world, My inheritance, when I go through this life, it's not going to go to some stranger. It's going to go to my family, to my children, um, to my church. It's going to go to people of faith. It's not going to go to strangers. And the same is true of God's inheritance. So that's the first part of faith is I know and I trust and I believe in the promise that God's given to me that I have an inheritance. And the second part of that is that with that inheritance, there's also something that happens in the here and now, which is I am promised that as part of my inheritance, I am being transformed into a new self. And that is a good thing. That is not a bad thing, even though the world might say that the behaviors I'm trying to achieve are no longer applicable in our lives. And we really, but I don't even understand how they could say that because what I'm trying to become is more like Jesus. And I don't see how you can reject the behavior of Jesus. I just don't understand how you can say that's unacceptable because of his love, his care, his compassion, his healing, um, his desire to be with people. How is that unacceptable? But his challenge, what's really unacceptable, is that to become an heir, you must be transformed. That's the unacceptable part. And I do get that. I do get that people don't believe that they need to be changed, that they're perfectly okay the way they are. And even though I think that's wrong, that's how a lot of people think. And so give them room and stay in your lane. That's my mantra for life. Give them room, stay in your lane, but I'm not backing off of what Jesus teaches me. And so now, with faith being this belief in something I cannot see because I trust the one who's made the promise, what does that mean for my daily life? How does that impact my today? Today's Tuesday, and I'm getting ready to go to work, and I trust that God has a plan for my today. So when I'm driving to work, what am I going to do? I'm going to give everybody plenty of room. I'm not going to try to punish them for their sins. I'm not going to condemn them, even though they may condemn me. I'm not going to put myself ahead of them. I'm not going to drive in such a way that I manifest that I'm more important than someone else on the road and my time is more valuable than someone. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave early enough and I'm going to use the time to listen to music. I'm going to use the time to think about what I'm going to say at my grandson's wedding. I'm going to use the time just to reflect on the glory. I'm going to use the time to pray for some of the people who are going to work today. And I'm going to use the time to pray for the people of my church and for my children. And I'm just going to use that time for the glory of God because I trust the one that's made the promise that he's changing me into what I need to become. And so I need to become that. I need to, as it says here, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as an inheritance, a place he did not know and he could not see, a place that he was promised that he would later receive as an inheritance. What did he do? Did he go, oh, that's a good idea, thank you for thinking of me? No, he got up and he went. And that's what faith does. It becomes what it's supposed to become. And so this year, that's the challenge for us, is will we become what God wants us to become? Will we be bold enough in our faith to be able to stand firm, even though others may mock or ridicule our stance? Will we be able to show enough love, compassion, and care so that our children eventually see Jesus in us? We don't see that happening sometimes, but that doesn't mean that we give up or we don't go. We simply keep going and we simply keep pouring forth. The truth of Abraham's story is he never really got to experience the promised land. Not in the way that God had promised it. So he actually dies in this life without receiving that promise, at least not in physical form. That doesn't mean that God is unfaithful or that God lied to him. It just meant that he was part of a bigger plan. And so he was willing and able to accept the reality that he was part of God's plan and he trusted God and God was the promise maker. And so he's going to live his life according to the promise maker. And that's a great way to start your new year, that you're going to be part of a bigger plan that God has. You're going to be faithful. You're going to get up and go what God asks you to, where God asks you to go, and do what he asks you to do. Even if it means that it's not the most favorable thing for you to do or the easiest thing for you to do. Abraham took his entire family with him on a very, very long journey to go to a place he'd never seen, based upon a promise that God made to him. And that is quite extraordinary. And that's what God calls us to become, is extraordinary people. And so I challenge you, and I challenge myself and all men and women of faith this year as we enter 2022. Let's be extraordinary people, and let's just show the extraordinary compassion and love and care that Jesus has shown to us. He's given us mercy, we should offer mercy. He's forgiven us, we should offer forgiveness. It's just what we need to become. And no, it's not easy, but it's what we're supposed to be. And we trust the promise giver, because we know that we are heirs with an inheritance, the same as Abraham knew that he was going to receive an inheritance based upon his faith. And so I pray that you have a great beginning to the new year, and you find a way to show your faith to all the world. Do something that is extraordinary.